Hi, I'm Star Jones. Over the last 25 years, I've had the privilege of interviewing and highlighting some truly interesting people. Everyone who is anyone, both the famous and the infamous, from presidents and their first ladies to kings and queens, movie stars and pop stars, captains of industry, heads of state, sports personalities, innovative entrepreneurs, and some pretty fascinating everyday people. Today, I'm proud to introduce you to Joan Gillman, who is dedicated to educating the next generation. Joan, welcome.
Oh, so good to see you. Thank you.
Same here. Fantastic. So, Joan, I said you're an educator, but as an elementary school teacher, how has your work been impacted by the current COVID-19 pandemic? I hear that from so many educators right now.
Well, it has certainly changed the way I teach. I really come alive when I'm in the classroom and interacting with the students. I love to be with them. Well, with COVID-19, I've now had to switch to total remote learning, and that's been a big change. Over our spring break in March, we had some training on it, and by March 30th, we were set to go. My big thought was, well, how do I keep my enthusiasm and my passion alive with the students while still doing it remotely? Give you a little example. With my second graders, we were starting our environmental unit. So I said, oh, let's go plant. So I'm having them save apple seeds and lemon and pepper seeds, and we did a whole planting together. And just seeing things start to grow was a great experience for the students.
That is excellent. What a wonderful way to incorporate learning into some activity and be able to keep the young people safe at the same time. This is of paramount importance to me because I have a 15-year-old who is going to be returning to school at some point. He was, of course, a part of the remote learning as a freshman in high school, but going into your sophomore year, you're going to miss so many of the activities that require more interpersonal relationships. So tell me, what new challenges do you think you've had to overcome to adapt to this changing circumstance, or what I now like to call the new normal?
Well, sometimes we would run into technical trouble. We'd have a class online and suddenly the kids would freeze or they can't hear me. And what do you do in this matter? So in some cases, I would go the old-fashioned route. After the class, those who could not connect, pick up the telephone, call them, and let them know what had passed on. But we also were using a couple of online learning platforms. Everything got posted there, including a recording of me explaining everything. So heaven forbid they missed it, they could also check back on the platform. And that was the same thing with my middle schoolers using Google Classroom. Everything got hosted there.
So, Joan, I found something very exciting that my son's physical education teacher actually had them do. They were assigned a specific physical exercise, and they had to tape themselves doing that exercise for X amount of time. And the kids really got into it. To watch my son do a 30-minute Pilates session was pretty cool.
It reminds me, I was doing these summer courses with the students. With my middle schoolers, we had from trilobites to Tyrannosaurus Rex, a whole paleontology one. And I was also doing a dinosaur and an animal course for my younger ones. And we actually made salt flour dough fossils. So the parents were there with the flour and the salt in the oven, and we were just making our fossils, models.
Fantastic!
And the fun part at the end was the dinosaurs we made.
Okay, I want one of those dinosaurs because let me see that dinosaur again. Let me see how good I am. This looks like a stegosaurus. Am I correct?
You'll get an A+, yes.
What you don't know is I'm a little bit of a dinosaur fanatic. I love dinosaurs. So you and I have so much in common. Just your ingenuity and innovativeness is really going to benefit our young people. Joan, I'm not sure where this comes from, but so take us through your own education and the path that you took to get to where you are today.
Well, I think things really began in my high school years. I went to one of those alternative high schools, kind of a a progressive one where you work at your own speed, you take the courses you like. So I started working in the lower school, tutoring in math, teaching recorder, organizing games in the playground. And outside of that, I was teaching swimming because I had my WSI, my water safety instructor card, and I was doing substitute ballet teaching. And I said, hey, I really love teaching. So this was the impetus for me to go into the field I truly love and feel passionate about. When I first went to Felician College, which was an all-women's college, 700 women, and I loved the school because immediately they sent you on field experiences to observe teachers, do practice teaching. And while most colleges waited to their junior year, second semester for your first experience, you found out right from the get-go whether or not this was the right career. So graduated Felician College, summa cum laude, went to take my master's at NYU. And that was in teaching the hearing impaired, K to 12. I wanted to learn sign language. And
oh, wonderful.
I thought originally I'd like to have a program teaching ballet to deaf children, but that didn't materialize as much as I would have liked. But the best came out of it was my student teaching experience at PS 47 Junior High School for the Deaf in New York. My cooperating teacher was fabulous. I was working with her with 7th, 8th, and 9th grade science students who were profoundly deaf. And if you have any knowledge of deaf children who are born deaf, perhaps after 12 years of schooling, they might read on about a 4.3 grade level. So how in the world do you get these complex science principles to these children who can barely read and write? Well, she used a whole hands-on experience. So during our electronics unit, the kids were making a miniature great adventure amusement park with working rides and pulleys and everything else. And they fully understood the concept. They could sign to you what was happening. They applied it in building. And just looking at this hands-on approach is something I just totally put into my soul and said, doesn't matter where I'm teaching or what kind of kids, I am going to use that same approach. And whatever I learned from this wonderful woman whom I'm still in touch with, I've applied it to my own teaching.
That sounds like some really wonderful experiences as a teacher. In reading your bio, I learned that you also have some experience at NASA. Tell us about that.
The first was called the Lunar Workshop for Educators, and we were learning about this brand new orbiter that was giving us tons of information about our closest satellite, the moon. And I said, oh, this is great. I'm going to use it in my class. Next came, there was one called Dream to Explore. They loved all these things. It stood for Dynamic Response of the Environment at Asteroids, Moons, and Mars. So it's like, oh my gosh, they always have these sayings. And that was awesome because I'm learning about moons and asteroids, and I actually used that information when I was giving workshops at some of the National Science Teachers Conferences. My favorite was in 2015 when I became a MAVEN Educator Ambassador for NASA. MAVEN being Mars Atmospheric Volatile Evolution Mission, what it stands for. This had to do with a MAVEN satellite that was sent out to Mars to find out what exactly happened to Mars's atmosphere, because at one time, Mars was much more Earth-like, and now suddenly it seems so desolate. And they were finding that the solar wind was sweeping out its atmosphere, even to this day. But what I found really interesting was we did a comparison of Earth features, surface features, to Mars surface features, because it seems Mars was much more Earth-like in its early years. And everything is like on a grand scale on Mars. You don't think of it that way. But I mean, we look at Mount Everest and we think gigantic. But they have Olympus Mons, which is the largest volcano in the solar system. You can take that one volcano and it would sit on the state of Arizona. It is that gigantic. So I've gone ahead and taught at many different professional conferences where I have the participants try to match up Earth surface features with Mars, and oh, it's such great fun. I love doing that.
Joan, I tell you, I'm fascinated at all of the different experiences. It sounds like you are a big proponent of continuing education. So how do you actually keep up to date with your knowledge of science and mathematics?
Oh my gosh. Well, first of all, I'm a member of the Science Teachers Association in New York State status, so I receive their bulletins, which keeps me updated. I'm a member of the National Science Teachers Association, NSTA, receiving their bulletins as well. But every single, also Kappa Delta Pi, but every year, come the summer, I'm always taking workshops. I think one of the happiest ones was the GRACE, Gravity Recovering Climate Experiment, when I did at the Museum of Natural History, because I was one of 22 teachers selected for that. And this had to do with the tandem GRACE satellites. I was tracking water usage from space, and they were using amount of gravity to figure out areas that were losing water and areas that were gaining water. I show this to my students and hear a collective gasp and realize, oh my gosh, is this really happening? I said, yes. Last year, I became a certified National Geographic educator. It took about a half a year of projects and filming and doing new lessons, but it's something I want my students to realize, that I want them to become lifelong learners. And what better way to do this is by actually modeling the behavior myself. And
fantastic. I have to tell you, as a lifelong learner myself, just to hear the enthusiasm in your voice for teaching is something that all parents want to hear. Absolutely. You're the kind of teacher that we all hope we have for our own kids, and we look nostalgically back on the teachers that impacted on our lives. Joan, lastly, what would you like to be the one thing the viewer of this video feature walks away with?
Well, I would say about how passionate I am about education. As I mentioned before, really, teaching is a calling for me. It's not just a job. It's really what encompasses my very being. And I consider teaching to be one of the most important professions of the world. We are teaching the next generation to take over when we're gone. They need to understand how this world works. They are going to be the stewards of our planet. And I'm hoping that I am making a difference in this world by preparing the next generation to take over. I really feel this is vitally important to the survival of our world.
The role that a teacher plays in a young person's life can really change the trajectory. This gives me an opportunity to pay tribute to my own third grade teacher, who still impacts on my life right this minute. She encouraged me to not just read books, but to go to the places where the books talked about. And I always say that I went to Paris the first time in my books, so that one day when I walked on the streets of the Champs-Élysées, I felt like I belonged there. And that came from my teacher. No question whatsoever. Joan, I have enjoyed this conversation so much. It is absolutely necessary for people to see that there are educators out there with passion that burns inside of them, purposeful passion towards teaching the next generation. And I thank you for your dedication.
Thank you. And I am going to continue teaching as long as I'm physically able to do so, because I truly love what I'm doing.